Hey, it's Brian Goulet of the Goulet Pen Company and InkNouveau.com. This is a review of J.R. Bond's new 1670 Bleu Ocean. This is an ink that originally came out as Rouge Hematite, and it was meant to commemorate the 340th anniversary of J.R. Bond back in 2010. It was supposed to be a limited edition ink with Rouge Hematite. Here it is. Nice red ink in a special bottle, more saturated color than most of J.R. Bond's other inks. It was going to be a limited edition thing. It was supposed to end in 2010 and kind of be done with it. But it was such a wildly popular ink, and it was available in such limited quantities when they first came out with it, that they decided to keep making it into 2011, and that kind of brought into question, hey, is this thing really limited anymore? And it kind of kept on being made, and it was kept on being popular. So here it is, mid-2012, and they've continued to make the ink, and I think now it's pretty safe to say it's not a limited edition anymore. It's more of a special edition. So basically the 1670 line of inks is going to be its own its own line apart from the other J.R. Bond inks, which there's 30. So Rouge Hematite was the first, and Bleu Ocean is the second. So it's going to be hard to kind of separate the two because it's only two inks in its own line, but the inks are very different from each other. And I know that a lot of the reason that everyone is so excited about Bleu Ocean is they're hoping that it has intense shading and sheen and stuff like that that the Rouge Hematite is really known for. And I kind of need you to separate out Rouge Hematite from your brain when you're looking at Bleu Ocean. I know that they're both 1670 inks. It's hard to really look at the two separately, but Bleu Ocean is really kind of different than Rouge Hematite. Rouge Hematite has some issues because of all the intense shading and the pigment and stuff that's in there to give it that metallic sheen. Bleu Ocean is much more of a conventional fountain pen ink. It's still deeply saturated. It has a lot of color to it, but it's not. I don't think it's going to be popular for the same reason that Rouge Hematite is. So I'm going to explain kind of more of that here in the video. I'm going to ink it up and show you what it's like on paper. I think it's probably going to be one of the first to really show you what the ink is like, but it should give you a better idea and hopefully, it's a $22 bottle of ink. It's not super cheap, so I want you to have the most information possible before you decide if this is the right ink for you or not. So here is my review of J.R. Bond's Bleu Ocean. The box for J.R. Bond 1670 Bleu Ocean is very similar to Rouge Hematite. Rouge Hematite is it's still a white box. It has a red star on the top instead of a little blue seashell there. The overall design is very similar, but instead of having gold with red writing, it's silver with blue writing. So really kind of neat. I've always liked the combination of silver and blue. It's just always been appealing to me. Some of the designs on here are a little bit different, a little tweaked to kind of give it that flair. The whole theme with Bleu Ocean is it's meant to commemorate J.R. Bond and his original travels around the world to get the original formulas for his wax and stuff like that. J.R. Bond was real big into wax back in the 1600s. So that's a little bit different there. It does say on the back, it's got this little warning here about how saturated the ink is. This warning was really put in place for Rouge Hematite. And Rouge Hematite, for any of you who've ever seen it or used it before, has kind of this pigment type sheen in there, this little metallic type pigment in there. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's something that kind of tends to crust up on the nib, and it tends to be a little harder to clean out. And so they put this warning on there because of that. Now they also put it on Bleu Ocean. I don't know that it's entirely necessary because to me, it doesn't really seem to have that kind of same effect. Now granted, as of the shooting of this video, I've only had the ink in for a day, so I haven't really been able to test it for a long period of time, but it's drastically different in the bottle than Rouge Hematite is. And I can kind of show you the difference here. I've got the Bleu Ocean. So here's a bottle of that, and with Rouge Hematite, you end up having this pigment that kind of settles down and needs to be, really kind of vigorously shaken to kind of get that into suspension. You can see it kind of swirling around there, and you know, that's the kind of stuff that is floating around in the ink. That's what gives it that awesome sheen, but it can also kind of be kind of a pain to clean out of your pens. Blue Ocean doesn't have that. Blue Ocean is much more like a conventional ink. There's no settling or anything like that going out of it, so I don't anticipate the same cleaning issues with Blue Ocean as with Rouge Hematite. But in any case, let me show you the details, the close-ups of the box here. It's really nice. It's got you know, the blue seashell with this nice silver embossing that kind of outlines everything. You know, it's got like dolphins and ships and starfish and, you know, knotted ropes and stuff like that, a globe, and, you know, so really kind of neat stuff. It's a very pretty box, and it's all silver embossing. Really classy. I appreciate a company that you know, takes the time to design nice stuff. And then here's the bottle. It's the same as the Rouge Hematite, the actual bottle, except that it's got a blue supple wax cap and a silver supple wax seal in the front of it. I'll show you some of the close-ups here so you can see the detail. It's really nice. This is I really like this combination here. Here's Rouge Hematite, just so I can compare the two. Still very nice. The presentation of these inks is really pretty awesome. I love the bottles. You know, a nice decent piece of glass. That's undoubtedly part of what you're paying for, is this nice presentation. The only downfall about the bottle, and this is probably no surprise to you, is the opening. When you open the thing up, it's got this kind of tiny little opening. Now it is still usable. It's actually about the same size as a Goulet sample vial. So if you've ever used a sample vial, it's about the same. It's almost nearly identical, in fact. So it's about a ½ an inch, just under 13 millimeters. So it can fit a decent sized pen in there. I've got, you know, a TWSBI 540 in here, a Pelikan M800 as well, so it'll fit in there. The only problem is if you're using a pen in this bottle, because the opening is so narrow, you really can't angle the pen to be able to stick the nib down in the corner and get the most out of the ink when it gets down, you know, probably below halfway. So when you're filling with this thing, you're only going to be able to really use the bottle until the ink level gets down to about here, because most pens feed from the a filler hole that is, you know, where the nib meets up to the grip section. That's usually about where it is. So you'll start to run into some filling issues, sucking in air and things like that into your pen when you get below half. And there's really not a good way to get it out of there unless you're decanting it into another bottle or use a syringe or something like that. Here's a Pelikan M800 just to kind of demonstrate the same thing. It will fit in there for the most part. It doesn't get quite down to the bottom. But, you know, so you're going to run into some problems if you got some larger pens with this bottle. So just be aware of that. That's definitely one of the things to be concerned about with this type of bottle. But it's also kind of a pretty bottle, and, you know, that was, I think, more of the intention behind the design, was how it looks and not necessarily how it works. You know, it is what it is. So as far as the actual ink itself, I inked it up in what I thought was an extremely appropriate pen, the Lamy All-Star Ocean Blue. So I put Blue Ocean in my Ocean Blue Lamy All-Star. I just thought that was kind of neat. So I threw it in here with a medium nib, and this is what I came out with. I used a Rhodia 80 gram dot pad paper. This is kind of my standard paper that I use for my ink reviews. It's a very ink resistant paper. So dry times are usually extended, you know, so it usually brings out more shading and stuff like that than some more absorbent papers, just as a kind of a pre-qualifier there if you've never seen me do a review before. I did a smear test. Oh, sorry, I used a medium nib as well. The Lamy medium nib is pretty good all around nib. I tend to like my nibs a little bit broader just because I like to write bold. I did a smear test here, which kind of tested, I waited 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds before I smeared it, and just that's to kind of test the dry time. And it was pretty darn good. At 20 seconds, I didn't get any smearing, so I'm guessing it dries somewhere around 15 seconds on Rhodia, which is probably better than most fountain pen inks. So that was kind of pleasing to see, because Rouge Hematite definitely has a longer dry time. Part of that pigment thing going on there. So Rouge Hematite still smeared a little bit, even as I was, you know, 30 seconds and more. I did the same test in Rouge Hematite with my red, ruby red Lamy All-Star. So I thought it was kind of neat. Blue Ocean, Rouge Hematite, blue red. Funny. This is no longer available, by the way. So don't email me and ask me about that, because you can't get it. So anyway, back to Blue Ocean. So the water test, this was to kind of see a kind of a realistic scenario. If you're writing, and I waited about 45 seconds to a minute, dripped some water on there, left it there for 30 seconds, blotted it back up, and I wanted to see what was left. Can you still read your writing? Well, yeah, you can. I mean, it's definitely not a waterproof ink. I don't even know if I would really call it water resistant. But just for a practical reason, if you're writing with this ink and you spill something on it, there's hope of you being able to read it again. And then here I took a wet Q-tip and kind of smeared it across. So, there's definitely some element of water resistance to this ink, which is always nice to see, because there are definitely some fountain pen inks out there where if you drop water on it in like 5 seconds, that ink is gone. Here I did some swabs. I did a single swab across, 2 and then 3. This kind of shows like how saturated the ink is, because the thicker you put it on, the darker it gets. It's pretty good saturation. It's definitely not like the most saturated ink I've ever seen, but it's definitely there, especially for a Herbin ink. The other conventional Herbin inks are not anywhere near this saturated. Dry time is very fast, saturation high. Water resistance I put as medium. Ease of cleaning is very easy. That is one thing that I love about Blue Ocean, especially compared to Rouge Hematite. Rouge Hematite is a pain to clean out of the pen. But, you want the sheen, you want the shading, sometimes you got to pay the price. You can't always have it all when it comes to these fountain pen inks. Blue Ocean, you're giving up that sheen, you're giving up some of the amazing depth that you're getting with Rouge Hematite, but at the same time, it's much, much easier to use on an ongoing basis. Shading I put as medium. It does shade some. It's definitely not an intense shader, but you can definitely get some shading out of it, especially when you're using a nice paper like Rodeo. And the flow is very wet. It really flowed wet, but it also dried fast. Usually when you have a wet flowing ink that is really heavily saturated with dye, it tends to take a really long time to dry. But I found that some inks, especially like Pilot Iroshizuku inks, are kind of infamous for this, is that they write really wet but dry really fast. And I found that to be the case with Blue Ocean. So I kind of felt like I was writing with an Iroshizuku ink when I was using this. It definitely felt like a premium ink, which is really nice because the Herbin inks really have kind of that premium feeling while you're writing. They're lubricated, they write really smooth, and Blue Ocean definitely has that smooth feeling. So props to them for doing that. Just covering on Rouge Hematite here real quick. Dry time is much longer, 30 seconds. Saturation very high. Does not have as good water resistance. It tends to bleed this kind of pink looking thing, which you can get some cool effects if you're doing some color washing or anything like that. Still flows wet, but doesn't feel as lubricated. You definitely feel more of the nib when you're writing with this than with Blue Ocean. But there you go. So I also did a test on some pretty inexpensive paper. I used some Mead college rule paper here. It's definitely not great paper, and that's kind of the point. It's very, very absorbent, very thin, and I wanted to see how it would perform. So I did Rouge Hematite and Blue Ocean. The reason I did Rouge Hematite with this is because that's one of the things that people really like about it, is that it doesn't feather and doesn't bleed very much. And that is definitely true. I mean, it stayed pretty true to my medium nib line here. I did the same medium nib with Blue Ocean, and it does come out looking a little bit thicker. So there is a little bit more spread. I didn't get a lot of feathering though, that's the thing. So it does look very nice. You don't get like these threads that kind of spread out from the line like you can get. I've had that in moleskins and stuff like that before. I don't get any of that on this paper, but it definitely has spread. So it almost looks like I'm writing with kind of 2 different nib sizes here. It's like this is more of a medium, and it kind of brings it to more of a broad. So, but that's not unexpected for a conventional pen ink. And then a bleed through on the back. The Rouge Hematite definitely did a little bit better job of fighting the bleed through on the back. I barely got any of it, even on this complete junk paper. Blue Ocean did bleed through some, and that is definitely to be expected. Normally I would expect it to bleed through like completely and terribly and maybe onto the next 2, possibly 3 pages through, but I didn't really get any of that. So I would say it's probably above average in terms of resisting bleed through, but it may not be like completely life-changing for you in that respect, but that's okay. I mean, it's still held up very respectably. So I wanted to, grab a pad of paper and just kind of write with this ink and, show you how it works. I already had the pen inked up, but the Lamy fits in there just fine. Inks up okay. So let me zoom in a bit. I don't know why I just took off the back of that pen. I was talking about filling it and just automatically went right to it. So I really like it. I really like the way that it feels. It's very smooth. Yeah, I'm a big fan of really smooth writing inks. I do not like a lot of feedback with my pens when I write. I don't like to have a lot of resistance. I just like to be kind of smooth and slick and just going on. So I definitely like it. I'm a big fan. I'm not good at talking and writing at the same time, so I also think it's kind of boring when I'm just talking or I'm writing and not saying anything. But anyway, you get the idea. I'm not getting like a whole lot of color variation or anything like that. It's a pretty flat ink. It does have some shading, that you can get a certain pen and ink combinations and stuff. But in general, I would not call this a high shading ink. But that's how that works in that pen. And I wanted to show you how it works in a Noodler's Conrad Flex pen, just to show a little bit of the shading capabilities of it. It's not particularly one of the inks that I would say is going to probably blow your socks off the most in terms of shading or color variation, but it definitely shows you how dark and saturated the ink is when you use it in a flex pen, just because it's putting down a pretty decent amount of ink. You're going to get a little bit of color variation, but not a whole lot. So, in terms of using it in a flex pen, it's not really like my tops, but I just thought it'd be neat to show you how it works. On the back of the box, they have a little saying here that's in both French and English, and it says, "Ink for fountain pens, never mix two different inks." J. Herbin on their conventional inks say not to mix their inks. I know plenty of people that do and don't have a problem with it, but that's their official statement. So take that for being an official statement. But of course, because it said that, I could not resist inking it up, or not inking it up. I couldn't resist mixing it. So I wanted to see what would happen if I mixed Rouge Hematite and Bleu Ocean together, just for ha-has. It's kind of an expensive ink. You probably don't want to go mixing this very much because it's very expensive to experiment with. But I was really trying to get the sheen from the Rouge Hematite to show up in some kind of mixture with Bleu Ocean. And I wasn't really able to get that. I did a 50% mixture of both. They gave me kind of a nice Merlot type color, very similar to like a Diamond Syrah. I did Rouge Hematite 2/3 and Bleu Ocean 1/3, and that gave me like a Black Swan Australian Roses type color, an intense like red burgundy. And I thought maybe having 2/3 Rouge Hematite I'd get some sheen. Yeah, I really didn't. I did get some kind of cool, color thing going on there. I did 1/3 Rouge Hematite and 2/3 Bleu Ocean. It gave me a purple, kind of like Noodler's Purple Heart. But anyway, I thought that was kind of fun. I wanted to share that with you. When I was first told about Bleu Ocean coming out through my distribution chain, J. Herbin and whatnot, they told me that it was going to be something kind of halfway between Bleu Nuit and Éclat de Saphir. And I think that's pretty accurate. Bleu Ocean is definitely darker, more saturated than either of those two, but in terms of its coloring, it's pretty much true. Éclat is a little bit brighter. It's not as deeply saturated. It's got more of a brighter like violet color to it. And Bleu Nuit is definitely a grayer, kind of a darker blue. But that's pretty accurate description, I think. I got some other inks here that I can just kind of talk through real quick. Azagao, Pilot Hiroshizuku Azagao is pretty close, not as dark as Bleu Ocean. Bleu Ocean has maybe a little bit more purple to it. Namiki Blue is another one that is kind of close, not as dark, has a little bit of a reddish sheen to it, just a little bit. But it could be compared. Edelstein, Pelican Edelstein Sapphire, that is more purple, a little bit lighter, less saturated than Bleu Ocean. Waterman's Serenity Blue, formerly known as Florida Blue, is definitely lighter. It's not a super close match, but it's not too too bad. It's the closest Waterman for sure. Sailor Gentle Blue is a little grayer, not as vibrant and not as dark as Blue Ocean, but not too bad. Aurora Blue is lighter, has more purple color to it, but still flows very wet, a lot like Blue Ocean does. Rowan Klingner Koningsblau is getting there. You know, it's not as dark. It's got a little more red to it, but it could be compared. Private Reserve Cosmic Cobalt, certainly the closest PR color, and is not too bad. If it was a little darker, it'd probably be closer match, but you know, it's in the mix there. Now we're getting to the last couple that are really kind of close. Diatramenous Hyacinth is pretty dead on, and in fact, I think if you inked it up in two different pens, you might have a hard time telling the difference between the two. Hyacinth just has a little bit more red sheen to it, and isn't quite as dark as Blue Ocean. And then the one that I think looks the closest to it is Diamine Sargasso C. So Diamine Sargasso C might be just a little bit darker than Blue Ocean, but these two are probably the closest match of anything that I was able to find out of, say, 700 colors. So hopefully that gives you a little bit better idea of, you know, maybe some inks that you already have and how it might compare to Blue Ocean. I appreciate you spending your time with me here. I'd love to hear what you think about Blue Ocean. You can just post here in the comments, and I can, you know, be happy to go back and forth with you a little bit. We'll generate a little conversation. I have my own opinions about the ink, but you know, I really love to hear what you think too. So thanks so much for watching. Really appreciate it, and right on.